All right, so with me back teaching beginning tonight, that means it also comes with all of the technology snafus that usually accompany my efforts. So I don't know what to tell you. All right, we are tonight. What a coming off the gospel meeting, and what a great thing that was. So we're gonna go back. If your memory is good, over a number of years now, when I've been teaching, we've been working through the life of Christ, and we've been looking at all four of the gospel accounts. And so the last time we were on this, we went up through his arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane, and so we're going to pick up now with Jesus having been arrested, and we will walk through these counts, now going up to his crucifixion and then the resurrection. Now tonight we're going to look as he is taken before Annas, and we're going to use John for tonight's purposes mainly, and we're going to be in John chapter 18, and we'll be looking at verses 13 and 14 and verses 19 through 24. So let's go to John 18 now, verses 13 through verses 13 and 14. And now remember, this is just after or as Judas and the mob has arrested him there in the garden. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. All right, now let's just drop down to verse 19. The high priest then asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in the synagogues and in the temple, where the Jews always meet. And in secret I have said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Do you answer the high priest like that? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. So now, let's think back again now. When they had left the Last Supper and they went to the garden, just somebody just kind of brief us up. What happened in the garden? What events took place? A lot of prayer on Jesus' behalf. A lot of naps took place with some of them. They couldn't stay awake when he asked them to. And now, what had Judas done? He betrayed him. And how did he do that? I mean, setting the stage for the actual betrayal. Go back even a little further. He sold him. He went to the chief priest. He sold him out for money. Then when he found the right time, he knew they'd be in the garden. He went to the garden, and he betrayed him with a kiss, as that was the sign that he would do. And then they come there, this mob with their clubs and their stones and everything else, and did they capture Jesus? What'd you say? He let them. He allowed it to be. If Jesus did not want to be taken, would he have been taken? No. He allowed this to happen. And so as they come and they do it, and then chaos begins to break out, what do we know about the things that took place? Somebody lost an ear. Who lost an ear? Yeah, one of the servants of, John tells us, what was his name? Malchus. And so, who cut off his ear? Peter cut his ear off. Why? He was ready to die with Jesus right there if necessary. He was ready to fight. He was a brave man, wasn't he, at the moment? All right, so he does that, and so when he cuts off his ear, what's the reaction of Jesus?
Puts it back on him?
Yeah, puts it back on him. Told Peter to put his sword away. And so, when this took place now, Jesus is then arrested. They bind him up, and he's led away by the mob. Now, go back to verse 12. Then the detachment of troops and the captains and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. And so that brings him then into our text where he is before Annas. Let's go back now, verses 13 and 14 again. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Now that's going to be important to remember in some upcoming events. All right, so he's taken, who is Annas? Father-in-law of Caiaphas, okay. All right, a little more about him. What else do we know here? He had been the high priest. He was previously the high priest, but now, who was the high priest now? Caiaphas, all right. So, his son-in-law. But when we think about this now, and I just kind of, was Annas, though he was not the high priest now, was he an important man? Was he a powerful man? I just kind of related it to here in our country. You know, the 4 or 5 men that are living that are the former presidents. Are they still the president? Are they still powerful men? Very much so. Go and try to challenge one of them and see what happens. You know, they're powerful men. So he's brought before Caiaphas first. Do you find that peculiar? Well, why didn't they take him? I'm sorry. He was brought before Annas first, but why didn't they just take him straight to Caiaphas? Thoughts? Do what?
Annas was older and had more power.
Older, okay.
Maybe just the greater influence that he had for so long.
Possibly. I think about Russia today. You know, how many powerful men are in Russia that have the power? Putin. But if you're a little bit older, do you remember 15 years or so ago, they had a rule at the time that he's done away with now, but he had to leave power. You know, they had like a limit. and they put Medvedev in as the president for 4 years, but he was a puppet. Yes, he was the president, but who was still running the show? Putin. And so I picture this as something similar. You know, I think Brenda's right on it there. He is very powerful. All right, so he's taken to him first, but now when he's taken to Annas here, what about the 11? Because Judas is not one anymore. So what do they do? Yeah, they're like the cockroaches when you turn the light on. No, I don't have a bunch of cockroaches in my house. I better clarify that before I get in trouble. But you go in a room and you turn that light on, they scatter, and that's what the 11 would do. Somebody turn over to Mark chapter 14 and look at verse 50. Mark 14, verse 50.
They all forsook him and fled.
Okay. They fled. Why did they fear? They were scared, weren't they? They were scared. They fled. And so, where now does that leave Jesus? By himself. He's standing alone before his accusers. And I think as we move through these final chapters here of these gospel accounts, I think it's important for us to remember why Jesus is doing this, who he is, and why, and who is it for? Me and you. All of these things that he would endure. And so now he is left alone. Now, in verses 15 through 18 back in our text, we will come back to them in a couple of weeks when we look at Peter's denial, but we're not going to really deal with that right now. So let's go on down to verse 19. And so now it begins. The high priest then asked Jesus about his disciples and his doctrine. Now, does Annas here, is he really interested in Jesus? Does he really want to know what Jesus teaches? He has no concern for that. What is the only thing that Annas is interested in right now? Find some way to attach blame to him. He don't care if it's true or false, does he? He just wants what? To destroy Jesus. That is the only thing on his mind. If he could somehow catch him in his words. And the Pharisees, really, they were pretty good at entrapping someone, weren't they? Now, they had met their match with Jesus. They tried over and over to entrap him, and they couldn't. But in truth, man, if I had been put in a lot of those situations that they would put Jesus and others in, I'd have probably ended up saying something stupid and got my head handed to me on a platter. But, all he wanted to do was discredit Jesus. He wanted to find some way, because they were going to kill Jesus. But what was their problem?
He had no fault.
He didn't have any fault, but they didn't really care about that. The people. They were worried because they had to do it in some way that what? The people would not turn against them. They'd get them to go along. Truth was of no significance to them. And so he's got to find a way that I can interrogate him to somehow fix it where I can where I can have him executed. All right, so he begins to interrogate Jesus, and he asks him about his followers. What would he ask him? He probably asked him, well, you weren't alone out there in the garden, Jesus. What? We know you had people with you. They might not have known exactly if it was 11, but he knew he had a fair number. Well, where'd they go? What'd they do? Since they deserted you, what? You must be a fake. You must be a fraud. They're not willing to die for you because they know you're what? A blasphemer, a liar? Can't you just see that being the line of questioning here? Oh, by the way, you know what? What are their jobs with you? Go ahead. Tell me something about that Peter guy, because we might end up needing to kill him too. Or what about that Matthew fella? What is it that they do? What do they know? And so it would go on. So the whole line of questioning was what? It was just a thinly veiled disguise to get to Jesus in some way. And the truth was, do you think any of this was a surprise to Annas? Do you think that he didn't already know what Jesus taught? He knew. One reason I know he knew was because why? They were obsessed with him. They were totally obsessed with everything Jesus was doing in a negative way, but totally obsessed. So he knew what Jesus taught. He knew who those apostles were, didn't he? There is no way that he did not know who those men with him were. Because how many spies do you think he had following them everywhere they go? I would say the number was quite large. And so it was just a cover. He knew everything about what Jesus taught and who they all were. And so he asked Jesus, he asked him about his teaching. What is it that you teach, Jesus? What is your doctrine? Because whatever Jesus was going to, if he would say something about what he taught, what was Annas going to do? What was he going to accuse him of? Whatever he says, it's blasphemy. He's already decided that because what? Because there's absolutely no good that could come out of his mouth. And don't say, well, how did he get that way? Look, nearly everybody today can take a politician from one side or the other and say there's absolutely no good can come out of their mouth. And don't deny that, because 95% of people are that way. So he's going to accuse him of blasphemy if he can get him to say just about anything, because he already knew what Jesus taught. And if Jesus talked about his teaching, which he's expecting him to do, he'll have him. And the thing about it was, and Jesus in his reply to him, when he asked about his teaching, how did Jesus respond to him? You already know what it is. Why? Because what have I been doing for 3 years? Teaching. And when Jesus went into a town to teach, did he go to some back room around the 4th Street and the 3rd Alley, and a little group got together with the doors closed and shut, and they would hear, and that was it, in secret? No. Where did he go? He'd go to the synagogue, the public places. His teaching was all out in the open, anywhere he went. And so he did not do anything to hide his teaching, and all those places he'd been, so it's never hidden. So now, let's go down to verse 20. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple where the Jews always meet. And in secret I have said nothing. You know, to paraphrase what Jesus said there, I could just say, you know what I taught. You already know. Verse 21, Jesus, so he asked him, why do you ask me? Why are you asking me this? You know. And he even said, ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. You know, ask my followers. Well, I guess he can't really ask the 11 right at the moment because they're in hiding, but, you know, what about the women that didn't run? But ask anybody that heard him teach. Plenty did that. Many of their own among these Pharisees here. And so Jesus points out that anyone that followed him would be happy to tell you what I taught. And so when he tells them this, what's the reaction we get now from the Pharisees? They're angry. This just boils up their anger. And if they didn't want to kill him already, boy, they do now. They are just beside themselves. And so, in verse 22, and when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, do you answer the high priest like that? What do you make of that? What do you see here? Pride, you say? Okay. Who struck him? Okay. So it says an officer in a courtroom, what is the responsibility of the officers there? To keep the peace, you know, to keep, Jesse's a big guy, so when he's been charged with a crime and we bring him into court, that officer's going to do what? He's not going to let him go nuts in that courtroom, is he? He's going to keep the peace. He's going to keep those who may be, what? Observing. If the officers wasn't there, there might not be much peace. They're keeping order, right? But does the officer play a role in the proceedings itself? You know, is that, we often call them bailiffs now. I mean, Brian back there, you've probably done that. Brian, if you have to go to court as a deputy there, do you have anything to do with determining guilt or innocence? Do you have anything to do with the administering the proceedings? No, you're there to keep order. So let me ask, let's pick on Brian out here. So what would happen, Brian, if we have if we're in court here at Franklin County and we have an incident, if we, things are just going along in the court and somebody just goes berserk. Now, you're going to take care of it. But as things are proceeding, and just because you know that Jesse's guilty, excuse me, with you knowing that Jesse's guilty, what would happen, even though the court's not through, but if you walk over and you just slap him silly because you know he's guilty, they're going to haul you off, and what about your future career as a deputy? It's gone. So what's taking place here? Jesus here has been unlawfully struck, hasn't he? Now, that officer might have been right if Jesse had charged him or something. But what's Jesus doing? He's just there being calm. Do you answer the high priest like that? And you know, and it's something that's important because in our system, Ben is charged with a crime. But in our system, Ben is what? He is innocent till what? Till he's proven guilty. So the principle is everyone gets their day in court, right? We get a day in court. And for it to be determined. But this officer's doing this. That officer completely disregarded the law. And what, you know, I've sat in several court proceedings here, and one thing I noticed, the judge here, one thing he demands, that judge demands decorum in that courtroom. You have a couple of outbursts, where are you going? You're going to jail. You're going to be put in contempt real quick if you don't behave yourself in the courtroom. And so, for him to come and to strike Jesus in that way, to make that accusation, which is not his role, that's a complete lack of decorum, isn't it? It's in other words, he's making a farce of the whole proceeding, isn't he? And so he shows this utter contempt. But really, if you think about it, what's he really showing here? He's showing that this is not even a trial. He's showing that what? The decision was made before Jesus ever walked into the room. They had already decided what would be. And so, it's a complete sham. And so, this arrogant officer, you know, and whether the accused deserves it or not, you know, they're to be treated with dignity. And then, do you answer the high priest like that? Now, a lot of people, when that statement's made to them, what would a lot of people do if it wasn't Jesus? David, did you say?
I took it like he was accusing Jesus.
Without a doubt.
He sought that opportunity right there.
And Jesus, you know, and I think he wanted Jesus to respond. Because if Jesus responded back, there's all they want. That's all they wanted. But Jesus does not retaliate with violence. And as always, he's one step ahead of them. So he challenges the officer, doesn't he? He challenges that officer to prove it. You know, prove to us, if I've done what you say I have done, you know, do it. Or if you can't prove it, what? Why are you hitting me?
It would have been good if that officer's hand had fallen off.
Yeah, and you know what? That could have been arranged if Jesus desired it. So he tells him to show the proof. But it's challenging. Why have you done this illegal thing to me? And so that officer had struck the Lord without the right or the evidence to give him reason. You know, would you want to go to judgment having struck the Lord? That is not where I want to be, in his shoes. And so in verse 24, Annas now, he's had enough. He is beside himself with anger. He can't come up with anything. He's tried. Well, only thing he can think to do. Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. He couldn't come up with any proof of these high crimes that Jesus had committed. And the thing was, see, he knew. In his mind, I know he's done these things. I'm sure he has done these things. And I can't come up with the proof. He's so mad. So this first installment, this first beginning of the first of these trials is now over. He's going to be sent away. They've been unable to prove anything throughout the whole episode. And even though they couldn't prove anything, notice they're still going to take the opportunity, though. Let's further humiliate him as we send him off. They had not been able to convict him of anything. So, in any honorable system, what do you do with the man? He should have been released at this point. But, I think later, like with Paul, when Paul was under arrest through things, a lot of that time, Paul was treated with a certain dignity, wasn't he? He, like when he was given liberty to have visitors and things like that, he was treated. I know there were times he was mistreated, but at times he wasn't. But Jesus, now, though there was nothing, they're going to send him away as if he was the Unabomber. They're going to treat him like the worst of the worst. Those that would demand the very highest security. So, again, it just gets more shameful. They're determined to humiliate and shame Jesus to the ultimate degree here as they send him away. But again, in truth, they should have released him immediately. But this is par for the course for the Pharisees, because think about it here. They didn't have any qualms about violating the law, the same law which they were so adamant about killing Jesus over. Didn't bother them to violate it. But what about Jesus? He's got to die. We got to kill him. And so now Jesus is now headed to appear before Caiaphas and before the Sanhedrin court. But as we're going to see, as we go on through these, I don't know, I can't even think of the right word to describe it. This just travesty with the Jews and then the Romans. It only gets worse each time. Mankind's darkest moment in history, it's going to get darker and it's going to get worse. And so, man is now, think about it, man is now ready to kill and reject the very Son of God. They're ready to kill the only one that can save them. Yet they want to kill him. Now, next time, we're going to look as he goes then before Caiaphas. We're going to go back, and I want us using all four of the gospel accounts in these, because I think it, again, shows us the harmony and the sameness of each one. So we'll go back and we'll use Mark 14 next time, though recorded in all of the gospels, as we look as Jesus goes before Caiaphas. And when we think about these things in this evening, what Jesus went through, what he did for you and me, all of those things were such a shame that we looked at this evening, but how much equal a shame if I live my life to make what we're reading of him going through on my behalf to make it in vain because I don't live my life for him. And to take the time and the effort to make sure that I get it right and that I do the right things. Maybe you're here tonight and where you find yourself is, I have not really been doing the things or living the life that will allow me with eternity with this one who rose for me. It's time to stop living a life that makes it of no effect for me. If you're here this evening and you need to respond to the gospel call, there's no better time than tonight. If you are a child of God, but you have steadily strayed over a period of time, you've allowed yourself to drift away from that resurrection, from his blood, making it of no avail once again. Straighten it out tonight before it's too late. If we can help you in any way this evening, let it be known as we stand together and sing.